All right, welcome everyone to today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited to be speaking about maximizing ROI of your benefit auction. So we're going to get started here as people start to roll in. Again, just so glad you guys joined us on this beautiful Wednesday. So let's go ahead and get started. Just a couple housekeeping items. As always, all attendees are going to be on mute throughout the broadcast. We're not going to be distributing the slides. However, we're going to be posting this to YouTube, and we're going to be sending out a recording to all the registrants after this is over. So you can share that with your committee and everyone else on your team as well. Or if you have to cut out early, that's totally fine. We'd love to hear your questions throughout the broadcast here. So feel free to input those in the little questions panel over on the GoToWebinar side there. We're not going to be answering them during the webinar, but we'll have a Q&A at the very end where we'll be going through some of the questions there. You can live tweet us at WinspireMe or at GestureTeam using the hashtag MaximizeROI. We'd love to hear from you. And this is all about interaction here, so I want to make sure this is useful for you guys. Today, I'd like to welcome our special guest, Dianne Kleber, who's the Senior Director of National Sales at Gesture. Welcome, Dianne.
Thank you so much, Ian. Hello to everyone.
And my name's Ian Loth. I'm the VP of Fundraising here at Winspire, and we love doing these webinars for you guys out there to help you raise as much money as possible for your events. So let's get to it. Oh, before we do, go ahead and tell us a little bit about Gesture there, Dianne.
Absolutely. So for those of you who don't know who we are a mobile fundraising company helping nonprofits raise more money at their fundraising events all across the United States. You see some stats here on the slide. $62.3 million already raised in 2018. We have over 3,500 partners across the country. And the number I like right there in the middle, that's a lot of money raised for our charity partners over all these years since we've been in business. So very excited to be presenting today.
Fabulous. Those are some great numbers. Yeah, you have a little bit more just about Gesture and what it is that you guys do?
Yeah, just to drill down a little bit, besides mobile bidding, which is what we're most commonly known for, that's the ability for people to bid on silent auction items through their phone. We're doing other things such as guest management, which are things like ticketing, seating management, sponsorship management, that type of thing. The ability for people to make direct donations, all kinds of things. We provide staffing, technology, just a nice rounded service to help you out at your event. So that's enough of my commercial, Ian.
It's great. If you guys want to learn more, you can obviously go visit gesture.com. They have a great service there. As far as Winspire is concerned, for those of you who are unaware, we are a travel company that helps nonprofits raise money with no-risk consignment travel packages. We've helped raise over $50 million through the use of our packages in events. We've been in over 45,000 events globally, mostly in Canada and the United States. And we serviced over 86,000 satisfied winning bidders. That's 86,000 people we've sent on trips, made sure they had an excellent time, and have come back and purchased more Winspire trips from nonprofits like you. So if you're not familiar with what no risk travel is, it's free to reserve and use in your event. You can promote the heck out of it in email, promotional things for your live auction. You can sell any of our packages as many times as you can, and you keep all proceeds above the nonprofit cost. Each one of our packages has a cost, and then you set the minimum bid above that, and typically you can raise a lot more, especially if you start selling those multiples. So if you want to check out more, you can visit winspireme.com. Also, real quick, we just have recently released our luxury properties, which is our less expensive items for the silent auction tables. They're just hotel-only packages from preferred hotels and resorts. So definitely check those out for your silent auction tables. You can go to winspireme.com/silent auction. Today, we're going to be talking all about how to use those two tools, right? Mobile bidding and consignment and other things as well to maximize the return on investment that you make in these events, because that's exactly what they are. It's an investment to put on one of these events. So we're going to be talking about thinking like a business, what exactly generates a return from your events, expense ratios, what those are and how to use them, and then also just how to think strategically when it comes to planning your event here in the near future. So before we get to it, we're going to do a quick poll. I'd love to hear from you guys. I want to know, what is the revenue goal for your next big event? I'm going to put up some options here. Is it less than 50,000, 50 to 100,000, 100 to 250,000, 250 to 500, or maybe you don't set goals yet? So we're going to launch this poll real quick. So instead of putting in the questions here, you should see something pop up. Go ahead and submit your answer now. I want to know what you guys, what's your typical revenue goal. This is kind of your biggest event of the year. I know most places just throw one big event, so I want to know what that goal is. We have about 75% of the people vote. I'm going to give it 3 more seconds. 2 and 1. Interesting. Great. What do you make of this, Diane?
Well, this is fantastic, because what this is telling me right now is we've got some folks on the call here that are throwing some larger events, and that's great. I mean, we got a nice mix, but when you see that 100,000 plus, there's some big events going on here. So you're definitely looking at ROI, because you're trying to maximize what you're doing there. Those less than 50,000 people, love that you're on the call, because I think we got some things that are going to really help you, especially think about how do you get more out of that.
Totally. When you think about ROI, right, even if you have a smaller goal, every dollar counts, right? And so it's really important to pay attention to the things that you're investing in that are going to start generating that return, right? So super glad to see this, and really happy to see that we're raising some large sums out there. Great. I'm going to hide those results. Great. Now we're going to talk about thinking like a business a little bit, and this is something that I like to preach a lot. If you guys are subscribers to Winspire News, our blog, we post weekly. I talk a lot about this, about how important it is to think like a business, and what do we mean by that, right? Thinking like a business. It's actually what we encourage you to do is actually stop thinking like a charity, where a charity is kind of like, please, 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 give me, donate. You're basically, you're depending on the good graces of your donors, instead of thinking it more like a business, in terms of you invest in certain aspects to your event to generate a large return. And there's pieces of that make thinking like a business make a lot of sense, and that means profit. So what is profit? Let's look at this, right? So for those of you who aren't familiar, profit means it is all of your revenues, right? The revenues that you make from your event minus all of your expenses. So in order to increase the amount of profit that you generate from your event, you need to decrease the number of expenses, right? And increase the amount of revenue coming in. It seems like a very simple equation, but it's something that if you're not paying attention to it closely enough, and every single piece of your planning process is not kind of centered around this, it can get lost in kind of in other aspects of the event. Did you want to say anything about profit there, Diane?
Now, I think I just love what you're saying, Ian, and we say this to our charity partners as well, is that, when you can focus on what's the outcome going to be, the profitability, that's where you're going to find great success with your events. It's interesting, Ian, we have some organizations that emerged from kind of a homegrown, like somebody in their family maybe had an illness or that type of thing, and they start up a nonprofit. And if it's a business owner who starts that nonprofit, you can't believe how fast they ramp up and how fast they succeed, because they automatically think like a business, because that's what they know. So there's a lot to be learned here.
And every single decision you make comes back to this, right? It's like, okay, we're about to spend money on something. Okay, this is an expense. How much revenue is this going to generate us, right? It might not necessarily make up that entire expense, but it could have other ancillary benefits to the event that are really important, right? This needs to be a really fun event, and we're going to talk about all the various aspects that go into this, but it's just important that every single decision that you make, especially when it comes to outlaying money, it comes back to, okay, how is this going to generate us revenue and ultimately generate us profit, right? The metaphor that I love, and I love how you kind of brought up the business owner already there, Diane, is this one night only storefront. And for those of you who've been on a webinar with me before, you've heard me talk about this, and it's actually kind of a crazy concept if you think about it. And this is your job, right? If you were to approach any business owner and say, hey, we're going to start a business, but we're going to keep it closed for 364 days out of the year, but one night out of the year, we're going to stock it with all these products and things that people can spend money on, and then we're going to open the doors. All the customers are going to come in and hopefully buy everything, and then out, and we're going to shut the door until next year. Business owner would think you're crazy, right? But that's what you have to do. So it's even more important for you to make sure that every single aspect of your event has that idea of profitability and revenue in mind as you plan for it, right? Because look, this is your only shot. This is the time we have everyone in a room together. So you want to make sure every single second of that agenda, every single piece of that event has a focus on fundraising. Super important. Great. So ROI, what is it? What does it mean? The literal definition, right, is return on investment, right? What does that mean? Well, when you make an investment in something, it's you're spending money on something, some aspect of your event. It could be the venue, it could be mobile bidding, it could be an auctioneer, it could be consignment items, it could be anything. But what sort of return are you going to get so that you start to generate that profit, right? So you're investing in things that generate a bigger return than what you're spending on. Did you want to elaborate on that a little bit more, Dianne?
Yeah, I think what's important about this, Ian, is that a lot of nonprofits and a lot of organizations out there, they have existing events that they're doing year over year. And a lot of folks who might be on this call, maybe you were handed an event, right, that already had the budget established and all those types of things and never even thought about ROI. So this is a great way to kind of open your eyes and take a look at, okay, and what we have coming up is going to help you with this too. Like, I've got this event that was handed to me. What I don't even know ROI. I've never even looked at it. What does this mean? And so I love that we're just kind of calling attention to this and helping everybody understand where they need to go.
Totally. And we're also giving you tools, language that you can use to speak to your higher ups, to your executive directors and your board members, right? If you start talking about things in terms of ROI, right, and making investment and getting a return, and you're using those key words, their ears are going to perk up. And the decisions and things that you try to make or that you pitch them are going to make a lot more sense in their terms, and they're going to be a lot more apt to say, yes, that totally makes sense. Yes, we should remove this or eliminate this aspect of the event because it's not generating any return, right? Definitely be taking some notes and writing down some of these keywords that you can use. I know mobile bidding software Gesture does a great job of this with their platform. Tell us a little bit about how you track ROI in your system, Dianne.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Tracking ROI, whether you're using, mobile fundraising technology or your donor database or a spreadsheet, doesn't matter. It's just so important to track this. I think like I said before, a lot of organizations, they have budgets, but are they tracking the ROI? So take a look at your budget, first of all, examine those goals and even the previous year's fundraising results, kind of take a look at everything and then using an expense ratio, which we'll talk about in just a minute here, you can create a budget for your costs, okay? And then keep track of all those expenses as they come in. I mean, use your resources at your organization. If you have a CFO, controller, a bookkeeper, whoever's working on the finances on your end, have them help you keep track of this, and then actually tracking the return on investment after you run that event. You're going to absolutely see what that looks like. So the step one is, as far as a key takeaway here, is keep track. If you haven't been, definitely do that. And so our system allows you to do that on some level for your event, but you have, I'm sure, many tools that can do that so that you can calculate your expense ratio.
And I'm sure you have someone at your organization who's already in charge of accounting and things like that. Don't be afraid to go ask them for a little help. Hey, I really want to get, because they're managing the, probably the expenses and things of your entire organization, right? And if you approach them and say, look, I'm interested in doing this and getting some help in this area, you're speaking their language, right? They can nerd out with you about expenses and return on investment and all these various things. And so it's a good thing to really kind of build some allies there. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So let's talk about expense ratio for a second. I know we're going to have a little poll here for you. What is expense ratio? Some of you may be all over this, and some of you may be saying, what is she talking about? But we're talking about what is the percentage of your total event that is expenses, right? So what is the ratio of expenses to what you I'm drawing
what you
spend. Exactly. I'm like, what is going on in my head here? Yeah. So right now, I mean, if you know this, and if you're unsure, we're going to throw up a poll. But if you're not sure, just go say what is an expense ratio. But let's take a look at where you guys are.
Right. So basically, what this measuring is for every dollar that you raise, how much were you spending to raise that dollar? Is kind of what this is, right? So out of your revenue, do you know? Was it 10 to 20% of that was expenses, 20 to 30? And after this, we're going to talk about what the ideal expense ratio should be. So we're going to give you just another few seconds here. 5 seconds, 3.
Got some last minute votes coming in.
And all right, cool. Let's just launch that. That's
good.
Yeah.
There you go. Very good. All right.
Yeah, this is good. We'll talk about it a little bit, but this is great to see that. I mean, anyone who has a 10 to 20% expense ratio, holy cow, that's awesome.
Wow. Exactly. I'm impressed.
Yeah,
I'm
getting a lot of
impressed.
things donated, it sounds like. But yeah, let's go ahead and just talk about what that means on the next slide here. Go ahead and hit it there, Diane.
Yeah. So what we did here is we did a little research. We don't just make this stuff up, but through Charity Watch, we found this article, and we have the resource here on the slide. The average is about 35%. 35% event expense ratio. So like Ian said before, every $100 raised should cost $35 or less. This is like if you gave it a C rating. So those of you that were in that 10 to 20%, that there were 23% of you, I mean, that's awesome. And even the 20 to 30%, I think if you're anywhere below this 35%, you're doing really well. Those of you that maybe are going a little above that, there may be some variances just based on the type of organization that you might have, or how long you've been in existence. Like newer nonprofits tend to have a higher ratio,
Yes.
while the more established nonprofits will have a lower. So this is going to vary, right? The
Perfect.
goal, of course, is that you should know what your event expense ratio is. And so if you
Mhm.
don't know that, this would be a good time to go back after this webinar and be like, hey, we need to calculate this. We need to understand what's going on at our event.
Totally. And to your point, right, newer nonprofits, right? If it's the first time throwing an event, you're going to spend a little bit more money on advertising and promotion and getting the word out. So you might have a little bit more expenses, right, in the marketing department to really get the kind of attention and attendance that you're looking for, versus those established events where you're going to get a certain number of people coming back. So another note too, just in terms of one thing, thinking like a business, what businesses often do is they set KPIs. What's a KPI? It's a key performance indicator, and your expense ratio is definitely one of this. So a goal that you could set, and we'll talk a little bit more about setting goals, is, hey, we want to reduce our expense ratio by 5% this year. Okay, we know it's at 35%. We want to get down to 30, right? And you think about it in terms of size of events. If you want to raise, if you want to have a $100,000 event, but you have a 35% expense ratio, that means you spent $35,000 on the event, right? But if you want to raise $100,000, that means you have to have a $135,000 event in order to raise that $100,000. Does that make sense?
Total sense to me.
Cool. Awesome.
All
Does
right.
free mean free? I love this slide. Tell me what you mean by this, Dan.
Well, here's the interesting thing. I think a lot of organizations say, gosh, we got this for free, so it's going to have a huge return on investment, right? Because the investment was $0. Okay. But just because something is free doesn't mean it's worth using or incorporating into the event, because sometimes the free things take away from those where you actually did make some type of an investment. So what's going to have a greater ROI for your organization is maybe getting a lesser value item donated, or procuring a consignment item. So here's the example. Maybe you got a trip for free, okay, that is going to end up going for $1,000, right? But you can get a consignment item that more people, a higher desired location, more people will participate in that auction item, and that sells for $5,000. And maybe, yes, it cost you $2,500, but you just made more. So
Correct.
it is a better ROI. So free doesn't always mean free. It could be preventing your donors from giving you the money that they have in their pocket.
Fabulous. I love it. And another kind of idea that I like to talk about here is that idea of the yard sale at the silent auction.
Oh, yeah,
Just because you get just because you get items donated doesn't mean every single item should end up on the silent auction tables, right? You want to bundle
absolutely.
items, increase their value, and you know what? Save some of the $25 gift certificates to for something else, maybe for a game, or you can even use it to incentivize your volunteers, or you can use it at a later event. Just because you get something donated doesn't mean it has a strategic place in your event. So it's important to just not necessarily, just be strategic about what you put out there.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing to that, Ian, related to silent auctions. I know everybody wants to take those free items, but if it didn't sell last year, and certainly didn't sell the last 2 years, don't
Right.
put it in your auction, because
Right.
items that don't sell don't reflect well. And so you want it to be a successful auction. You want to be able to say, we sold everything and this is how much we made. So just, like Ian said, save it for a game prize or a raffle or something like that.
Yep, and those items that don't sell, that like you to your point, right? They end up being detrimental because if there's too many items out there, people end
Yep.
up bidding less on all of them, and it actually brings the average return on your auction items down. So having fewer items that have a higher perceived value will actually decrease the demand, increase the demand because your supply is down, and the amount that people spend on those items will actually go up, right? So
100% correct.
totally. Great. And kind of in this same vein, right, kind of stepping outside of the auction items real quick, let's talk a little bit about things at your event that maybe don't generate a return. So think about these things. Think about how much money these things don't raise you, right? Flowers, decorations, musicians and entertainment, lighting, food. We're not saying get rid of these things, eliminate these things, but just be look at opportunities for savings here, right? You don't need the super expensive tablecloth and those perfect looking chairs or those huge centerpieces necessarily. Save $500, save $1,000, right? A musician entertainment. Yes, a band could bring, more people potentially, but like, is it really going to get the kind of people in the door that you want? Are you getting your supporters, and you're just getting, people who want to see the band, right? So maybe save $1,500 on the band and get a DJ. Food, eliminate a course, right? You can save a bunch of money just by eliminating one course, or having chicken instead of beef. Definitely want decorations and lighting in your event, but to go drop $10,000 to decorate your your gala, if your goal is $50,000 to $100,000, not a good investment, right? That can change depending on the scope, but just keep in mind the things that you're spending money on that they generate zero return, right? No return on investment. So just be kind of frugal in those areas. Do you want to add anything here, Dianne?
No, I actually have an example. I was chairing an event one time, and we, thought we had to have all these high-end tablecloth chairs, this whole thing, and so we did. We ordered all those, and the day of the event, our event planner showed up with the wrong chairs. And of course, we were all, mortified. We're like, oh my gosh, but we had these amazing chairs. Well, guess what? Everybody still sat and ate their food and did everything. Nobody complained about the chairs, and we saved money because they were
Right.
not, the expensive
Just because
chairs.
they're not, bamboo chairs with the plush, they
Correct.
don't fit the theme perfectly. I know my wife was very particular about the chairs in our wedding, but fundraiser is a little bit different than a wedding, right? So
Exactly.
totally. Before we get too deep in this, I want to say, but there is a big giant but on these things. These things can actually generate a return. How, you might ask?
You're confusing us, Ian.
I know. I'm throwing it into the system, but that's if you can get them underwritten, right? And for those of you who don't know what an underwriter is, it's basically getting a sponsor to sponsor those aspects of the event. All of a sudden, you have aspects of the event that you can say, hey, would you like to sponsor, the tablecloths or their chair? Hey, maybe there's a chair vendor in your town that would so graciously donate these incredible looking chairs, right? You're actually generating some revenue and generating some return indirectly when you get these sponsors to underwrite the cost of these items. That being said, though, if they have to spend $5,000 to $10,000 to sponsor the decorations, they could be sponsoring or underwriting the cost of things that actually generate revenue, like an auctioneer or the mobile bidding software or consignment items. But we'll get to that a little later.
Actually, it's the next slide, Ian.
No, it is. Oh, here we are. Hey, there we are. Great. So on the other side of that coin, flip that coin over. What generates a return? Here's the list of some things at your event that generate fabulous return. We're actually going to go and talk about each of these, but I just want to list them off real quick. These are things that help you make money. A great sound system, right? So the auctioneer or the MC can be heard real well. An auctioneer, they're going to pay for themselves within about 5 minutes of getting on that mic and interacting with their audience. They're going to not only pay for their fee, they're going to start amplifying and the amount of revenue you make. Event fundraising technology, things like gesture, right? Text messaging, communication, consignment auction items. That's what Winspire does. Interesting venues, huge, because that really brings it out, and a CRM. So let's talk about each of these things, starting with the sound AV. What do you have to say about this, Dianne?
Yeah, I want to dig into this because we go, as I said, we have 3,500 customers out there. We see a lot of events, and there's nothing worse than I show up at these events sometimes and the auctioneer or the MC or the executive director gets up there and the audience can't hear them.
Right.
So it's just it's tragic because this is the moment, right, where you're talking about your mission and you're going to get up there and do your live auction or your call for cash, whatever you call it. So you definitely want to make sure that your sound and AV is really solid. What does this look like? How do you make sure you do that? Definitely be around for setup, and even have a pre-event run through. I think what the big failure is, and what happens sometimes is, you're doing this pre-event run through in an empty room. And you got to
Right.
think about the 200 to 400 to 7,000 people, however many are in that room, right? And so you always want that sound system to be above and beyond what you think it needs to be. So you want to
Totally.
review your goals again for your event. Who's going to be attending? What is the energy you want? What's going on? And, will they be able to hear you? So that is huge and so important.
Totally. I repeat, do not use the native in the ceiling speakers that hotels provide
No.
in their banquet rooms, right? We have a picture here, these stand-up self-powered speakers. They have the amplifiers within them. These are the speakers you need. And notice they're up on posts. They're up high, right? Because they're above the heads of everyone when people are sitting down at their tables. If you have speakers that are down on the ground, right? I know been to some events with these Bose kind of standalone speakers that come up to about 5 feet or so, but and the speakers go from the ground all the way up to the top. They're not high enough, and so the sound still gets garbled because it's hitting people's legs as they're sitting down. You need these speakers that are up high, and you need at least 4 of them, one in each corner of the room. And it starts as soon as you get more people, you want to get more speakers in there. And I highly recommend, especially as soon as you start getting over 200 people, or even 150, but definitely 200 people, you want to hire a professional sound company to come in and help you. And that can be scary, right? They can be expensive. You're talking about a few grand here that you want to invest in the sound, but every penny is worth it when it means that like Dianne said, right? The appeal, the speeches can be heard, and the auctioneer can be heard. We actually did a webinar all about sound. It's called the sound of music. I think we did the theme to that, but we actually got an auctioneer, Keith Fox, who's a DJ and an auctioneer, all about it. So definitely check that out. I'll send it in the email after this, but sound is imperative.
And you know what? A lot of times, your auctioneer will. You can go to the next slide, Ian. The auctioneer can help you be a part of that. If you're using a professional, especially a professional benefit auctioneer, they are going to very much be concerned about the sound system, and so they can provide recommendations. But definitely, that is a big part of it. So that leads to auctioneers. I know many organizations say, well, we've got our executive director, we got a great board member who knows people, all those things, wonderful. But I will tell you, auctioneers, definitely one of those ROI kinds of things. You want to make sure you get the right auctioneer for your event, right? So definitely, the tone of your event, what your donors may or may not like. So do your research, definitely talk to multiple auctioneers out there, see them in action or watch their videos. They all, they're in this business. And so make sure you have the right auctioneer for you. But I'll tell you, I was actually, Ian, just at an event a couple weeks ago that is a customer of ours, but also an organization that I support. They were using, it was actually the mayor of the town prior to this year. And this year, well, the mayor lost the election last year, so they didn't have the mayor anymore. So based on my recommendation, I said, definitely look at a live auctioneer, a professional auctioneer this year. Last year, they raised about 22 to 20, I think it was 25,000 in their live auction and fund the need. This year, they raised 67,000.
Wow. There you go.
Great return on investment, because that auctioneer cost a little less than 30-some thousand.
Just a little bit less, right? Like I said, they will pay for themselves within 5 minutes of getting on that mic. And I'm sure all of our listeners out there have been to their fair share of fundraising events, and just the difference between someone who's an MC or loves to be on the mic and an auctioneer who knows how to extract money out of a room. We're not talking about cattle auctioneers or car auctioneers. No, anybody who they need to be a certified, benefit auctioneer specialist, or someone who has been in the business a long time and can help start to consult you on what items to have in your auction, how many items to have, when to do the fund and need, cash appeal, paddle raise, help you kind of start to structure your event. And then when it comes time to get up on stage, they know exactly how to just get everyone so excited, laughing and participating, raising those paddles. You're gonna raise volumes more money just by hiring a professional, for sure. And what we'll do is we have plenty of resources in Winspire News that we'll send out and with the recording, just some articles on, best questions to ask, how to interview auctioneers and maybe some resources for where to go find them. Technology. All right. This is your specialty here, Dianne.
It is. It is. So this is one of the things that we hear from organizations. The organizations who currently aren't using technology, I know this is like a big hurdle to get over, but it is a great return on investment when you can bring fundraising technology to your event. Yes, it costs some money, right? But the ease in getting people to be able to bid, donate, participate in the fundraising is huge. We see on average about a 30% increase in revenue when you go to technology, in particular with that silent auction, when you're going from paper and pen. So it's a big ROI. One thing though, as you're looking at, Gesture's not, excuse me, not the only one out there. So as you're considering your event fundraising technology, you want to get the best ROI by choosing the right one. So what are the features that are included with your technology? Do they have ticketing and seating management and, the ability to vote if that's something you do at your event, if it's a Dancing with the Stars type of thing? Can you do raffles through the platform? What kind of displays are there? Meaning, can you do a donation display where you watch the thermometer go up? And then the biggest thing for organizations we hear a lot is, can you analyze that data? Do you have the ability to get that uploaded into your CRM? And if they don't have that, not the right one. The other thing is, are they doing text messaging? All kinds of things that you can be looking for in your event fundraising technology. Some of them out there are doing single events, and some of them are definitely saying, hey, this is an annual subscription. And so you need to compare kind of apples to apples as you're doing things. Making sure you're choosing the right one, because text messaging is a huge part of what most of the fundraising technology companies do. Some of them actually charge to do that, a cost per text type of thing. Or if you're not, maybe you're just using a text messaging service in general for your organization throughout the year. A lot of them have this cost per text associated with it. And some companies do not, so I could tell you, Gesture, we're not charging a cost per text, and that's something that we offer in there. So that is huge. So I guess the bottom line here is just making sure you're educated and comparing all of the potential features and benefits and how it's going to work for your event to see if it's the right fit for you, and that you definitely will maximize the ROI, because everybody's pretty close in price. So are you getting the right features?
Yeah, let me just say that, the bidding technology is just over the last several years has improved dramatically. And it's just been, a real joy that the events that I've been to recently that have had mobile bidding technology versus the ones that haven't, it's now, if it was kind of a question before, it's no longer a question. It's just extremely apparent how much it adds to the bidder experience. You can sit at your table and still bid on items as you're, it makes it more social, right? You can still be interacting with folks and bidding on things. And I just personally have really enjoyed it.
Hey, Ian, I'm wondering, are you open to a hand raise? I would just love to see how many people are currently using technology at their events if they want to do a little hand raise.
Yeah, if you want to do a little question, if you want to put in the questions, anybody who has been doing that. We actually have a little post webinar survey that we'll be sending out to you guys as soon as you exit here that asks if you are interested in mobile bidding. So we can hear from that. But if you guys want to say that we do or I do,
I do see some people raising hands. There's a little hand raise feature here in GoToWebinar,
cool.
And hands going up. Yeah. You see, look next to their names. Their little hands are going up.
Oh, nice. I didn't even know that was possible. Learn something new every day.
Yeah. So this is great. There are a number of people out there currently using technology that's great. Use it to its maximum ability. That's the other thing. And I think I actually have this on another slide, so it'll be redundant. But since I'm talking about it, using all the features of the technology you have, because I think some folks go, well, we'll just use this piece. Use it all. So good stuff.
Great. I was just sitting here raising my hand in person. I had no idea there was a little button I could click, but no one's watching me. I'm just sitting here by myself with my hand raised. Cool. So kind of on the same note, just about, return on investment, thinking like a business, talking a little bit about consignment items. And I promise this isn't an advertisement, because I know there's other consignment companies out there. Winspire is just one of them that provides travel experiences, but consignment is one of those things that generates a return, right? Versus those things that don't. And I think Diane's example was perfect. You know, if you're going to get something donated that will maybe raise you $1,000, that's still not going to raise you as much as a consignment package that maybe costs $3,000, but you maybe sell for $4,500 and then sell it 3 times, right? Because that right there, you've just raised $4,500 on a single package, and you didn't have to go out and spend time procuring it. You actually can be strategic about how you procure the items to the interest of your donors, as opposed to taking, hey, does anyone have a condo that they can donate? Does anyone have this? It can be really difficult to make sure that the items that you get donated are going to match up with the interests of your donors, versus going shopping, right, on behalf of your donors for these experiences. You know, from a consignment company like Winspire, you can go, you know, if you know that you have a bunch of country fans, you can go get the, you know, tickets to the CMAs or horse or Hamilton, what have you, right? You can really start to be specific about the items that you get for your customers. And if you think back to that metaphor, the one night only storefront, you know that there's going to be a bunch of people coming through just one night of the year. You best be sure that the items that are on the shelf are things that those people want to buy, right? So by doing though, by investing in consignment items, you can make sure that that those items are going to really fall in line with those interests. And just one more thing about consignment, really getting it underwritten is one of the easiest things to get underwritten for your event. And I'll tell you why. It's because when an underwriter sponsors the cost of a consignment package, they're going to get recognized during the live auction, right? You can imagine the auctioneer up there. This next package to Napa Valley, incredible package, was donated by Mr. and Mrs. Smith here in the front row. Thank you so much. Round of applause for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And the bidding starts at $3,200, right? So those donors are going to be thrilled, and it's perfect for businesses like dentists or lawyers who might not have services that they can donate, but they can underwrite the cost of a travel package and get noticed for it, recognized for it, which is what these events are really all about, is recognizing those donors. So just a fabulous tool, and selling it multiple times is also a great aspect, which I've talked about here. And that's what you can do with any consignment package. But it's not just consignment, right? And this is a really important point about selling multiples. When you're going out there and securing those items for your live auction, maybe it's a dinner for 5 or 10 at a local restaurant. Always, always, always ask the donor, right, the restaurant or wherever you're getting this donated, to ask them if we're getting a lot of interest in this and a bunch of bidders, can I sell this more than once, right? And even if they say no, I'm not quite sure, you can still sell it more than one time at the auction, just as long as the what's getting bid is higher than the cost of the package. The value, let's say it's $900. If the bidding goes up to $1,200, $1,300 and you still have 2 bidders, you best be selling it twice, right? Because then you can still make that return between $900 and $1,300. That's $400, right? And you can go back to the restaurant and say, hey, we actually sold this twice. Can I buy one more package from you? You know what they're going to probably do 9 times out of 10 is donate it to you anyway. So there's ways of selling multiples on donated packages as well. It's just supremely easy with consignment, because you just know, and most auctioneers know as well, that they can just sell multiples of those consignment. That's really how you start racking up a lot of money for your live auction. Venues. This is your guys' slide. I just love this slide so much, Dan. Tell us a little bit about your venue recommendations.
Well, one of the best returns on investment that you can give or purchase, I guess, is delighting your guests, right? And so now I know Ian said earlier, and you go, okay, wait a minute, now we're confused. You don't want to necessarily spend too much money on the chairs, the linens, that type of thing, but you want to leave your guests being like, this was great. I loved this event. I want to come back next year. I want to give, right? So delight your guests. And one way you can do that is with your venue, right? If you've been doing your events always in a, let's just say, hotel, and they're fantastic. I love the hotel venues. They're perfect. But sometimes mixing it up and finding a venue, especially if you have a connection in the area who will underwrite it. So, for example, what you see here on the slide, airplane hangars, car dealerships, sports stadiums. If you have some kind of a connection that can help you get one of these venues, especially if it's at a reduced rate, then this is great. Okay, it's going to helps you to set the theme, understand who's going to the theme and the tone, and what's the outcome here. So, thinking about your guests especially, and I think this is one of the areas that some organizations don't think about is think about your crowd. You have a young professionals group, you're definitely going to do a little better and sell more tickets if it's at a brewery as opposed to a hotel ballroom, right? And I know that's a very extreme example, but be thinking of creative venues and even like car dealerships. If you have a car dealership who is sponsoring your event, why not host the event at their dealership? So something to think about there.
It's great. Yeah, it's a great, I mean, it's an easy thing to sell, right? Because you can say, hey, we're going to bring, we're going to bring, 50 to 100 of the community's, VIP, most wealthiest people to your venue. Could we please rent it out for this event? Sure. Great exposure for them, right? And you're talking about return on investment, right? When you have it at a unique venue, that's what's going to start pulling those crowds in. Oh, did you hear, it's going to be down over here. This unique airplane hangar. Like, I know I would go for that far more than I would go for, a band, but there's far more that you can get return on from a venue than you can from, getting a live band.
Right. The opposite being, if you are in a hotel ballroom and it's the only venue that you have out there and they are donating, then the best ROI may be the band. Exactly. So you have to understand your event and understand what's going on and your donors and kind of customize it from there to get the best ROI.
P.S. I really want to go to that event in the airplane hangar. That just looks so awesome.
I know. It's very cool. It is very cool. So cool. So
cool. What is this CRM?
Yeah. So here's the thing, your donor database, right? Your contact management software, whatever you're using out there. I will say, while it's not necessarily event specific and you're saying, gee, how do I get the best ROI out of that? This goes back to the point I made earlier that there are some donor databases out there that have some great features that you might not be using. Okay. So is there online donation processing that you could be using? Do they have ticketing that's already included in what you're paying for? Can you send out mass emails or do text messaging through that? I mean, every donor database is a little different. So you got to look at the features of yours. I know that we talk to organizations all the time and they say, well, I think I can do that through my donor database. We don't currently use it, and you hear all this confusion. A great way to really maximize your ROI and something you're already paying money for is to take a look at all the features that it has and use them. So keep that in mind as you're looking at your donor database.
That's great. All right, moving right along. Thinking strategically, and I've alluded to this a little bit throughout the presentation, but this is something that I also like to talk about, because it's that overarching strategy that's so important when it comes to organizing your events. And this is one thing, setting strategic goals. I have no idea why it's blinking, but we're just gonna roll with it there. When you think strategic, you want to set goals, and it's really important when you're organizing an event to be specific about those goals. We talked about goals in the very beginning about making sure that you have a revenue goal for your event. And what happens when you set a revenue goal is you can start splitting it out. It's okay, now that we have this goal, right, of $100,000, how are we going to get there? Okay, we're going to get X amount from the live auction. We're going to get X amount from the fund a need. We're going to get X amount from the silent auction. Okay, we still have X amount that we need to still raise. So how are we going to do that? Okay, we're going to do it through a raffle. We need to throw a raffle here. We need to have some games. That way, now you have a roadmap for how you're going to get to that goal. If you're not setting goals and you just say, okay, we're going to take whatever we can get, then that's a completely different situation. There's no kind of end game in it, right? Versus setting that goal, setting the roadmap and the stepping stones for how you're going to get there is going to really help you achieve it in the end. Did you want to say anything about setting goals there, Dianne?
Yeah, the only thing I want to add is adding the word realistic, and because I think goals are fantastic, but a lot of times, we talk to organizations and they're like, well, yeah, we raised 20,000 last year and this year our goal is 200,000, and right. That's great. But what are you doing to grow at that much of a percentage? So realistic, setting realistic goals, setting yourselves up for success. I love it.
And remember what we're talking about with expense ratios too, right? I mean, if your goal is $100,000, right, and you know that take my example before, right, and you have a 35% expense ratio, that means you spend $35,000 on the on the event, if you want to reduce that expense ratio by 5%, that means you're going to get an additional $5,000 that's added to your 65 that you were raised, right? So there's different things, levers that you can turn and push and pull to try to achieve that goal, different, KPIs, right? Key performance indicators that you can really start to utilize to reach that goal, as long as it's realistic, like you said. Another thing I like to talk about is casting a big net, right? Making sure that everybody in the room has an opportunity for donating something, right? And your audience is made up of different types of people, right? There's going to be your wealthy, your kind of middle tier income, and your guests of folks who probably, they're maybe came for free. They might buy a silent auction item or a raffle ticket, but it really stops there. But you still want to have opportunities for everyone to participate, and you want to have items or ways, avenues, right, for those dollars to come in. And let's just kind of look at a quick list here of some of the fundraising components that do this, right? Sponsorships is huge, and that's a lot of pre-event efforts that go in from your team to go get things underwritten and sponsored. Ticket sales, another huge revenue generator. However, ticket sales, you want to basically use ticket sales to pay for, the non-revenue generating things, but you want to be careful with that. Silent auction items, live auction, your fund need or paddle raise, raffle, and then other revenue enhancers. The wine pull, heads or tails, dessert dash, all these things are bringing in revenue. So you want to make sure you cut out time within your agenda, your event agenda, to have all of these things take place and make sure that they have the necessary time to do that. And as soon as you start going over on certain aspects, it's going to start cutting into the time that that maybe the live auction needs to generate its return, or the fund need. So just make sure that when you have your agenda, you're sticking to it, so that each one of these opportunities have enough time to generate the revenue and the specific revenue goals, hopefully, that you're setting. Do you want to add anything there, Diane?
The only thing I want to add is a lot of times we do hear that people are saying, oh gosh, we're not going to do this, or we're not going to do that. We're only going to do the fund the need this year, which is great if that's what, like Ian said earlier, if that's what your crowd wants. But there's going to be people in the room with different amounts of money in their pocket. And so what we would like to say is take a look at the components that you could have and what is going to reach the most people. Casting that wide net, so important.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And just know, if you're going to maybe say, I'm not going to do the silent auction this year, you better have a plan to make up for the revenue that will be lost from that, right? And it's all about tracking, right? If you can go back and look and see how much you raised from the silent auction last year, if you raised $10,000, okay, where's that $10,000 going to come from, right? So just be very strategic about, how you are planning on achieving that goal.
Well, that takes us to the next slide, Ian.
Right, auction procurement. This is a doozy, and I know this is a doozy because it ultimately is what so many people spend a ton of time on, right? So many volunteer teams out there spend a majority of their time leading up to an event on auction item procurement, right? Which is a huge time suck, and it doesn't necessarily always pay off, right? It's one of these things that it's so imperative for you to think strategically and not just take what you can get, because it's easy to just go out and knock on every door and see what comes in, and then kind of assess and be like, okay, what are we going to put on the tables? But that is not time well spent, right? Better time can be spent going out and getting sponsorships, right? Getting more tickets sold, things of that nature. So when you are doing, I'm not saying auction item procurement is bad by any means. It's definitely something that you need to do, but the amount of man or woman hours that are spent doing it should be closely inspected, right? And it's important to form a strategic approach for every single donor that you ask a donation from, right? Before you just go knock on every single business in your town, instead develop a plan and say, okay, who is our audience? What are they interested in? What things will they spend money on? Okay, X, Y, and Z. Okay, let's figure out how we can create an auction item that they will buy. Okay, we need A, B, and C to build this auction item. Okay, I know that these retailers over here are going to be interested in that or be able to provide that. So I'm going to approach them and say, here's the auction item that we're planning on building, right? Let's say it's a dinner, a night on the town, right? We already have a restaurant donated this, right? We want to go to this limo service and say, hey, we have this date night that we're putting together. Would you be willing to kind of go in and donate and become a part of this date night package? If not, we can go on to somebody else, another driver service, but we wanted to check with you first, right? You are approaching them with a plan, and when they see that you have a plan and a strategy surrounding your auction, they're going to be a lot more likely to donate than they would be if you're just say, hey, what can you give us? If you leave it open-ended like that, you're not going to get anything. You're going to get something very small as opposed to something very specific, right? Can we get a limo service for 4 hours on any Friday night, in the next 8 months, something like that? They're going to be like, okay, I can do that, right? So forming that strategic approach before you go out and start knocking on doors is huge, right? And it takes a little more time and a little more thought to do it, but it will have huge dividends. I want to give you just some examples. Oh, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I do. Just related to that, I mean, does it take more time? It may up front, Ian, but on the back end, it doesn't. You know what I mean? I think what happens is that, you're going out there and you're looking for donated items. If you don't have a strategic approach, you're doing all this calling follow-up and trying to get these things and get whatever you can get. And that takes a ton of time. Totally. Whereas thinking like a business and having this strategic approach and saying, these are the types of items we know our donors like. This is what we want to get. This is the package we want to build. These are the people we want to target. I will even say be a little competitive in it. And, if you're building a package and say, hey, the brewery down the street gave us this for this package, and we want to create another one that's this, don't you want to be represented here too? So I think being very strategic as opposed to just, well, we asked them last year, or I happen to know the guy who owns it, not saying you shouldn't reach out to those folks, but making sure it's part of this very strategic approach to packaging.
I love it. Think about it from the point of view of the donor, right? They're going to want to donate to something that, they can get excited about. And so if you just ask them for something, anything, that's not something they can get excited about versus, hey, this is what we're going to be building for these donors who are going to be at our event, the exact people you want to be talking to, they're going to start listening for sure.
Yep.
And here's just some example questions about getting to know your VIPs. And one place to start, I know there's a lot of people, okay, well, maybe I don't know my audience very well. Where do I start? How do I get to know their interests and things? A great place to start is with your board, right? Because your board is going to be hopefully active in inviting, the people in their circles, their social circles to come to this event. So getting to know their interests is a great place to start as far as where to start procuring your items. Another great place to put these questions is if you do have an existing followers or existing donor base is to send out a free survey that you can do on SurveyMonkey. Just say, hey, what are you interested in? If you had $5,000 to spend on a nice vacation, where would you like to go? And if you send out that question and you get a bunch of answers, right, you're going to start to see what most people are interested in. And the more people that are interested in a specific vacation or location, the more bidders you're going to have and the more opportunity you're going to have to sell multiples and raise more money, right? Same thing with, maybe a lower price point. You have $2,500 to spend on a vacation or an asset. 1,000, 500, 250, 100. All of these kind of levels will help you guide your procurement efforts for both the live and silent auction.
Well said, Ian.
Awesome. Open your auction early.
Yep, that's all about using your fundraising technology. So if you use a mobile bidding provider such as Gesture, you have this ability to open your auction early. This is one of the things when I was talking about earlier, use all the features that your provider has out there for you. You can't believe how many folks we work with say, no, we're not going to open our auction early. Open it early. Pre-promotion is the key. People get to preview the items. They can start bidding on the items. You actually raise more. Raise more. And I have an example, the next slide here. So the Children's Museum of Denver, they opened their auction early, okay? I'm not exactly sure how many days. I think it was 5 days prior to the event. And before the event, they had bids totaling $14,239 before anybody even walked in the door. So what this did is it resulted in them making that auction made up 20.9% of their total revenue for the auction, for the event, I'm sorry. And so that's fantastic, right? And without even walking in the door, they already had $14,000 in hand. So
That's great.
typically speaking, generally speaking, I should say, when you open your auction early, you end up closing it out at a higher level because people, when they get to the event, if you have alcohol at your event, which many do, they start socializing, drinking, and the competitive juices start. And so maybe they said to themselves, well, I would have spent $150, but it was so much fun, and the bid was already so much higher. I just went for it, and they end up spending more. So always
Totally.
fun.
I love it. Real quick on this, I just want to say too about opening early and having kind of an online component like what Gesture offers. And we didn't talk a lot about promotion here today, but promoting your auction items is so crucial and so key, so that people know what they're walking into before they get to the event. If, as opposed to walking in the room the night of and they had no idea they wanted to go to Napa Valley, and you can kind of imagine that hushed whisper conversation between husband and wife, saying, oh, I really want to go. No, you don't. Oh, I really want to go. But versus having that conversation a week and a half early, it's, oh, look, they're going to have this incredible trip to Napa Valley at the auction. I'd love to go. Then they have a week and a half to talk about it, and then they're going to walk in the night of the event prepared to bid a whole lot more than if they aren't sure whether they wanted to go in the first place. So pre-promotion is key. Social media, email, do it.
Agreed. The donation appeal. So this is a big one too. If you aren't currently, if your event doesn't have a donation appeal, definitely take a look at, are you getting all the money out of the room? Because a lot of times there aren't the components. There's some folks who don't want to walk away with an item, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not doing this donation appeal, any live auctioneer that sits down with you is going to say, gosh, let's talk about if and how we want to make this happen. So, but the key is, do we want to do one? Probably yes, unless, again, there's no money in the room. But then what kind of an appeal do you want to do? Do you want the people to raise paddles? Do you want it to be digital? Do you want it to be a celebrity kind of thing? Do you want to have an emotional video? Definitely want to have your auctioneer doing it. So you got to plan through some of these things, but you certainly want to be able to get as much participation as possible. Again, I can't emphasize this more, getting those benefit auctioneers involved. Yeah. They know all the tips and tricks for making that donation appeal work. Definitely get your best return on investment with an auctioneer and adding this in if they indeed agree that this is right for your event.
I totally agree. I can't stress that enough either. I mean, the difference between an auctioneer and someone who doesn't know, it's hard to ask for money. Right? Mm-hmm. Not to mention in front of a huge group. And what the auctioneers do so well, and if you've been to an event with a great auctioneer, they get down into the audience. They're running back and forth between people and congratulating them and having them stand up and doing all these things that get people excited to donate money and for your cause, get excited about your cause. And it's just an effective donation appeal, I think, almost requires a professional who knows what they're doing out there. But such an important part of an event, and definitely should not be overlooked. You should absolutely have an appeal at some point in your event. Great. With that, thank you, Dianne. I just wanted to put this up here real quick. If you want to learn more about Gesture, you can contact them or with the phone number here, go to gesture.com. Same with Winspire. If you have an event coming up and are interested in using one of our no-risk travel packages in your live or silent auction, please contact us or visit our website, and you can get started there and view our entire catalog of experiences. Just real quick, for those of you who are not subscribed to Winspire News, we come out with weekly blog content all about how to run your benefit auctions more effectively and get more ROI. We're giving away a $1,200 cruise right now. So if you go to winspireme.com/giveaway, we're going to pull that winner on April 1st, and it's a cruise that you can use in your live or silent auction, your next event. And last but not least, we have a podcast that myself and my friends Renee and Danny Hooper do. It's called Events with Benefits. And I was just thinking about this today, Dianne. I don't think we've had you on yet, which we need to do. So
no, definitely.
We'll definitely have to do that here in the next month or so. But you can go to eventswithbenefits.com or wherever you get your podcast, just search for Events with Benefits. Tons of kind of industry leaders talking all about just this very thing, how to get better ROI on your benefit auctions, and various tools and tricks that you can do there. So Dianne, I'll be in touch with you about that.
Perfect.
And last, we wanted to open it up for some questions. I know we got some really good ones. We actually have Aaron on the line, who has been monitoring the questions and answering some of them while we were talking, but wanted to know if you guys have any questions now based on what we talked about. Go ahead and pause them and let us know. We're here for you.
Awesome. So we already have a few in here. So we have John wondering about using consignment items in the silent auction and how much you should use for the starting bid there.
Sure. Yeah, and it totally depends. The starting to bid totally depends. So for those of you who don't know, right, every single consignment item has a nonprofit cost, right? Whether it's $1,000, $2,000, and then we usually have a recommended starting bid of anywhere between 10 to 20%, right? It's all about how much you want to make on that first starting bid. Hopefully it goes above that, right? But if you have a $2,000 package and you have a starting bid of $2,400, which is 20% over, that means if one person bids and one person only bids, you're going to make $400, right? Hopefully it goes up from there, and you can even sell multiples in the silent auction. And you can see just on the bid sheet, or if you're using Gesture, you can see all the people who bidded on it. You can actually go back and sell it to multiple people, for the same price if you want. But we usually recommend a starting bid of 10 to 20%.
Awesome. Cool. And then we have Gary wondering about what he should expect to pay for a professional auctioneer. Is it usually a flat rate or a percentage?
It varies. Do you have an answer for that one, Dianne?
It does vary, and it's kind of regional as well as by the type of auctioneer. Some of them are charging a flat rate for sure, and some of them do a percentage. So, Gary, it's not, it's not consistent across the country and by auctioneer. They each have, some of them have different levels, as a matter of fact. So that's why we emphasize definitely talk to multiple auctioneers and find out how they charge and what their style might be.
Totally. Yep. An auctioneer in San Francisco is going to cost a little bit more than one in Oklahoma, right? And it also depends on how much you're trying to raise. So definitely, like Dianne said, ask around, ask those questions. I'll definitely send some resources with the recording on good questions to be asking your auctioneer while you're interviewing them.
Awesome. And then I know we're cutting it really close here, but we do have another great question coming from Michelle. She's wondering if there's an optimal item to attendee ratio for your auction.
Great
item
question.
To attendee ratio. So are we talking, I guess we can handle both. Ian, I'll let you talk about live, and then I'll talk about silent.
So for live, we usually talk about timing, right? Anything that you can get done in under like 45 minutes to an hour is ideal, right? So if an auctioneer can sell an item every 3 to 4 minutes, that's 10 items, right? So we usually recommend anywhere between 8 to 12 is a good amount of live auction items. Silent auction items is where we kind of start to do it based on the number of attendees. I'm curious what you think, Dianne.
So as far as silent, I'll tell you, we talk about one package for every 4 or actually 3 to 5 guests. We've kind of made it even lower these days because it's more of those things. You said it earlier. We want to create a competitive environment, right? Supply and demand. So less packages, less items. So more folks want to bid on those items. So one package for every 3 to 5 guests. As far as live, I think the timing, you're 100% correct. You don't want this to be too long. But in general, what we see out there is between 5 to 10 items is kind of on average what we see out there in those live auctions. Keep in mind that while you may only have 5 items, some of those may be sold as multiples. So that gives you an opportunity to sell more.
Exactly. That's a great point. And another way to think about the silent auction one, I think the 3 to 5 guests is a great metric there. Another way to think about it is half the number of buying units in the room. And a buying unit is one wallet. It's a couple, right? So if you have 200 guests, that's 100 buying units. And then half of that, and I would say that's a maximum, right? Like 50 items is still too many in my opinion. I would say it's a little bit less than that. But if you take the 3 to 5 per, one for 3 to 5 guests, you get around the same number, maybe a little less.
Cool.
Good question.
I think one more question here. Cheryl's wondering if you guys can talk about revenue enhancers. She doesn't want to do too many or over ask.
Yeah, that's a tough. For me, that depends on the. It's all about the auctioneer who knows how to do that sort of stuff, getting up on the mic, making it fun. I personally couldn't get up there and do a very good revenue enhancer. I would probably choke. But but yeah, I mean, a great auctioneer is going to have those like in their back pocket. You know, they'll have maybe certain things planned, but there's some other really good things that they might just pull out. There's, you know, the wine pulls, the, you know, wine trees. There's so many cool ideas. And if you just type in to Google maybe Winspire revenue enhancers, there's some blog posts that we have out there that will, and I'll send it along as well. Did you have any maybe specific recommendations, Dianne?
No, not really. I think it really comes down to knowing your guests and knowing your donors. So I think, you know, if you haven't done a lot of revenue enhancers in the past, try one or two, you know, just try it, easing into it. I agree. You don't want to do too many or over ask, but I think the bigger, I'll call it a crime that I see out there is we under ask. And
Right.
so it is finding the right balance. You know, I wouldn't jump into if you did none last year to 10 this year, obviously, but,
Right.
you know, certainly ease into it and try them because you want to get every penny out of that room as you can.
So I would say raffles are a great revenue enhancer, just because they're, you know, it's a low kind of commitment. People can buy tickets for like 20 to 30 bucks. Even I've seen them as high as like 50, even as high as 100. Right. And it's, you know, it's easy for you to have a volunteer going around and selling raffle tickets. Just don't be pushy, right? Just it's more about, you know, getting people excited about the potential prize. One thing that we offer too is a winner's choice raffle. So you can get a 3 experiences, reserve 3 experiences and say, hey, and that are around the same price, and say the winner of this raffle can choose between those 3, right? So you kind of have something for everybody. And then if you have kind of a higher ticket price point for your tickets, you know, it doesn't take that many tickets to start making a lot of money, right? If you have a $3,000 package, you have $100 tickets, you just got to sell 30 of them, and you know you're going to start making money with every single ticket after that. So you know, and there are different ways to slice it, different ways to skinny cap, but you know, raffle is a really effective way, and you can start selling before the event.
Oh, that looks like that's all the questions we have today, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. And absolutely thank you, Dianne. It's been a pleasure working with you on this. And
thank you so much for inviting me. This has been great.
For sure. Let's do it again soon.
Sounds good.
All right, everyone. Thanks to all you listeners out there who joined us today. Please stay tuned for more free webinars coming up very soon. And we'll be sending out an email with not only the recording, but also some of the resources we mentioned during the webinar. And you should see that in your inbox sometime tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care now.